Hello, welcome to. Okay, I forgot what it was called, but I think it's the Daniel Vail Show Part 2. And I would have to look at the Wikipedia to know what happened in the main event. The only thing I know, in the main event, the only thing I know is Nasty Boys went against the American Males to see who to see who would go against the American Males. And the challengers for the tag team titles later on in the telecast, Sister Sherry came out and she had said to, she started taking notes about the match so that she would know what to tell Harlem Heat. Colonel Parker came out, who up to this point had actually started running away from her when she started falling in love with him. All of a sudden, he reverted back to his old self and he brought her out flowers. In the middle of that, Jerry Saggs, he and his tag team partner Brian Knobbs had They had been described as loose cannons by Dusty Rhodes. So being that he is a loose cannon and could not, for some reason, he just got upset at what was going on between the two. He took the flowers and he broke them over Colonel Parker, and while that happened, one half the World Tag Team Champions, who was managed by Parker, Dick Slater, came out and he hit Brian Knobbs with his boot, which led to the Nasty Boys losing to the American Males. So now the American Males go on to Nitro to face the Blue Bloods. And I would have to read the rest, but I believe I read that once that it was Alex Wright versus Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie Guerrero legitimately hurt himself, so they had to call off the match. And I'm gonna read about that naturally to make sure it's not a mistake. Yeah, Eddie Guerrero, this was considered his TV debut. Oh, no. Yeah. Guerrero suffered an injury, alright, and Alex Wright asked the referee to stop the match. So that happened, and then the next match, if I'm not mistaken, was the tag team match. And then after that, went on the air. So first match was Johnny B. Bad and Brian Pillman wrestling in a 20-minute time limit match to determine the number one contender for the United States heavyweight title. Ended in a draw. They went into overtime, as we call it. And I think it might have lasted 5 minutes. And Johnny B. Bad caught Pillman. Well, Pillman hit him with... They both went for running cross body blocks, and he had caught Brian.
he had put on, and he had stopped while colliding with Brian. Brian had, I think he went sideways, but wasn't hard enough to hurt himself. So Johnny pinned him to become the number one contender for the United States title. Next match was Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman losing to beating Cobra by using his I'm sorry I paused. I just realized I think I'm writing something that I myself had typed for Wikipedia, and I just realized I might have spelled on the words wrong. So the next match after Cobra had used I typed out to Sergeant Pitbull Pittman's Code Red submission hold, which I'm not really sure on the matches are in order. I'd have to look. Oh yeah. Also earlier in the night, in the main event portion of the telecast, Big Bubba Rogers defeated Mark Thorne, and Disco Inferno defeated Joey Max. Then, of course, you know the rest. And I spoke about Johnny B. Bad against Pillman, Cobra against Pittman, and then DDP versus the Renegade for the World TV title. That, what happened was Renegade, seeing how Max Muscle tried to get involved, I think he hit Max Muscle with a clothesline of the top ropes. When he went through the bottom rope to get back in the ring, he got caught in the leg by Max Muscle, and DP hit the Diamond Cutter on him to win the TV title. And just by looking at this match, he had only been wrestling for about 3 years at this time, Diamond Dallas Page. And he was not smooth, so it took a lot of hard work. And right here it paid off, because this was his first ever title match. And I remember wondering, I didn't know why, or even, I don't even remember why he got the title shots in the storyline, so I don't know why they had the match. All I know is that when he was TV champion, I don't know if it was the writing or if it was just talking, but he did very well in making the TV title a big deal. So even though he still had a long way to go in his ring work to really show that he deserved to be in the mid-card and then finally in the main event, it started right here, and I think that's very impressive. There's one part, and like I said, I don't know which part was which, but what I remember was how right before one of these matches, it was either before the TV title match, or it was
either before that or before the tag team titles, when they showed Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in the back. They spoke. Oh yeah, it was right before the TV title match. He was throwing his robe around and he was just taking off his tape out of frustration, not knowing anymore who he was or what he was for that matter, because they called it bad luck. I just think he ended up on a losing streak, and luck just happens. It's not good or bad. It just happens. And I don't know what the purpose was, but they had somebody. I don't even know if it was made up or if this person really was what they said he was, but claimed he was a psychic. And the next thing you know, he's got him falling in love with. He's got him acting vain again, and just spoke about Monday Nitro after this. The night after this on my new podcast, Nitro versus Raw. Actually, it's Raw versus Nitro. That's the name of it, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, so that I wouldn't leave anybody in the dark. So, after hearing this, let's go to Nitro, Raw vs. Nitro, and you can hear first episode about that is the night after this. And the most interesting thing to me is how people had I don't really know how many people find it ridiculous or even stupid, or a lot of people use the term bizarre, but what I find to be the best part of this, because it was so outlandish and it was so original, because if they ever had a quote romance storyline, it was between two real people. Like, they showed Miss Elizabeth and Macho Man get married, and that was years after them being married in real life. So this was the first time in history that they had a pretend-only romance storyline, and it helped get one of the characters over, so it made it even better. And an even better part of it is leaving you in suspense of what it was going to lead to. Harlem Heat versus Stud Stable for the tag team titles. That's the next match. That is something that I hope that I hope one day on 83 Weeks they talk about this pay-per-view, because I really don't know I really don't know why it started the way it did. I don't know let me restate that. I don't know whose idea was it for it to start, and I don't know why they put it on hold until after they wanted to end the current tag team title storyline between Harlem Heat and the two other teams at the time. But I always thought that it was a great storyline. And there's some things we should not say because it may be presented the wrong way. But when you think about it, who would the only thing I would have blamed Parker for when the storyline started was insulting Sherry and then all of a sudden kissing her. And it's like, if you were to see that in real life, you'd be like this. You'd be like this in real life. How could you possibly think she would do anything but hit you after you insulted her? So that's really what made it funny, but also made you want to see it more because if you see something like that, you're like, well, I gotta see how this transpires. What's gonna happen? And lasted about 2 months, and then when the stud stable, which they should have just called them Buck and Slater, because they were just a tag team at this time. When they won the titles, let me state that they beat Stars and Stripes, which were former tag team champions. That was Marcus Alexander Bagwell and the Patriot. And I'm not really sure how long after this the Patriot was released, but it took about 2 or 3 months after that they formed the American Males the first time. And so about, I guess, week out, possibly 6 nights after that, is when they decided to give them a shot at the Raw Tag Team titles, Buck and Slater, and to really help the storyline go further, they Sherry, instead of getting the men disqualified, she just got involved long enough for the referee to fuss her, and as he's fussing her, the big guy, Stevie Ray, gets hit in the back of the head with Slater's boot, and they win the titles. Next week, they decide. She comes to Parker, and she said she wanted to, her plans were to make sure that there is a rematch for the titles. And her idea was for she and the men to face those 3 men. And I had said to my mom that this was not as offensive as you would think, because you knew nothing was going to happen. You knew the worst that was going to happen was she was going to take her anger out on him. But you knew he would not do anything. It would take away from the storyline. So, at the Clash of the Champions, they made the match official, and by the end of that match, Sherry goes for a top rope. I'm not sure the first person to do this. But Jimmy Snuka made it famous when he jumped from the top of the cage onto his opponent doing this body splash. She went for a move like that off the top rope. She missed Parker, and she was out for a few minutes. She stood up. All of a sudden, she was in love with him, and that actually was the best finish she could use because of how much taller he is than her. So she jumps up to kiss him, and she pins him by kissing him. So it made it even funnier. And what was even funnier than that was Bobby Heenan's response, telling Parker to run for his life. And then every other time after that, not only would she kiss him, but he would run away from her. So that's what made it even funnier. So that's why when he came out with flowers earlier in the main event show, I said he reverted back to his old self. I think I said earlier that about not blaming Parker for liking Sherry in his character because she was beautiful. And let me just mention this. Let me mention this because I think this is something that people who may not watch the Hall of Fame show because they might have just stopped caring about wrestling a long time ago to the point they don't even want to hear the stories of people who were in wrestling at one time. People who may not have seen her be inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame. She was, as tough as she was and as much of a temper as she had, and what you saw on TV was how she really was. She really could lose her temper like that. But she was also extremely sweet and very, very unselfish. So that's somebody you want to be around and do business with. So that's why you never hear anything bad about her. Plus, she said herself that she never held a grudge because she felt like it was too short. That life is too short to hold grudges, she said. I've always been curious myself and what I've been curious about is when work with around somebody, friends with them in real life. Oh, and by the way, they both said about each other that they were good friends with each other when they were not on the road together. Sometimes they would visit each other. So that's why I say this. I would ask, because of watching shows like this, not just wrestling but also TV shows, and hearing how somehow a lot of these stars that are on TV that have done love storylines with each other, how they are close friends. I'd always be curious. It's always been curious to me. How do they find it in their heart to do that? And I know it's acting, but how do they? I guess that's why I always want to interview people, is because of curiosities like that. I know it's acting, but sometimes sometimes what you do in acting can turn into reality, and that's why I always was curious as how they could do that. But when you look at these characters, it's very easy. It's very easy to see how they could do that because of how opposite it is. How opposite it is from from real life. That's why. That's what I would imagine would be the right way they were able to do it. In the middle of them deciding to make it official that they were a thing now, in the middle of kissing each other, it's when that was the biggest turning point of the match. Referee was distracted by. Let me press play so I can see this now. Looks like Booker T. Yeah, Booker T. and Dick Slater were the legal men, so the referee, Nick Patrick, was trying to tell Bunkhouse Buck, Stan Stevie Ray to separate because it was getting out of hand. And meanwhile, back when Carl Parker and Sherry started kissing each other, Slater got hit with his boot against his head by the Nasty Boys, which led to new champions being crowned or actually regaining the titles in Harlem Heat. And they showed the replay and everything, and they had Bunkhouse Buck say everything on the microphone in front of Gene Okerlund of how he felt about what just happened. Parker said, only thing Parker could say, number one, reminding him that he was the one who ran the whole thing, and that being their quote promoter, he had the power to find a way to give them another title match. So he said, whereas it's a terrible feeling to not have the tag team champion, for his men not to be tag team champions anymore, said on the other hand, his feeling was great that he had to have Sherry, and that once again he promised he would see them again another match. So they plug the next month's pay-per-view, and they trying to think, what did they say? Oh yeah, they show they have Arn Anderson walk into the dressing room with the Mean Gene Okerlund, and they showed the setup video promo for he and Ric Flair's match with each other, and then he cut a promo setting up the match, saying how he felt. And when Ric Flair walked out to the ring, because I think it was Arn Anderson was the first person to come out, and then it was Ric Flair. So you could see how much emotion Ric Flair had, but Arn Anderson was the one who really set up the emotional part of this whole story, and by saying that anybody who has had a friend that's like a brother to them, we can all imagine how hard it would be to have to face them if we were in their situation. If we had to fight them for any reason, it would be difficult. So that's what he said. He said how you'd be lying if you did not admit to being a nervous wreck, and that Ric Flair had always been like a brother to him when he didn't have a real one. Or should I just say, when he didn't have a brother, period, Ric Flair was that brother to him, and vice versa, because Ric Flair didn't have a brother or sister. So that's how you really know it was a big deal. However, the match was not as big as it could have been because of the fact that I'm sorry. When I'm talking like this, I'm thinking about my best friend, and it just reminds me how much I miss my best friend because he lives out of state, and sometimes he works up north, so it's very so I can being that I don't drive, I can never go visit, so it makes me want to cry just thinking about how much I miss my friend. And so anyway, that was even though that promo from Arn Anderson should have set up the match, there was no storyline to support the match. So that's why, in my opinion, that's why the match was not as great as it could have been. But as I've said before, because I recorded this before, but I can't find it anywhere, so I have to. That's why I'm recording this, because of the feeling of needing to record it again. So what happened was, Flying Brian Pillman at one point, and I think they spoke to him before this match even happened. Brian Pillman ran up to the ring apron and started messing with Ric Flair, fussing at him for something in character. Next thing you know, he hits Ric Flair close to the eye, or right where the cheekbone is, and then Ric Flair hits him back, and then referee's not looking, so Brian kicks Ric Flair in the back of the head, right where the neck, right where the ear is, falls right into Arn Anderson, and the DDT is hit. Hits him with the DDT and ends the match. So I believe that had he not gotten involved, which might have been set up by Arn and Rick in real life, because he might have gone to them and asked him to, they might have asked Flying Brian to join them and to start it. They might have asked him to get involved in the match because of how so many things were ad-libbed at that time. So then, after that match happened, the War Games match happened with the Dungeon of Doom going against Hulk Hogan, Sting, Lex Luger. First of all, it was Hogan, Sting, originally Hogan, Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Big Van Vader. Well, Vader went AWOL, as they called it, and I think they had released him because of a fight he had with Paul Orndorff. And then he subsequently went to the WWE in the future. Don't know when. That's another reason I like doing this Nitro versus Raw, or Raw versus Nitro podcast that I do when I'm not recording a pay-per-view. When I'm not recording a pay-per-view or doing Today in History, I do one about Raw. I do Raw versus Nitro, and I'm glad. Another reason I'm glad to do that is to see when Vader made his debut. Which is another thing to look at for this podcast. So they added Lex Luger with the condition that Luger would get a future heavyweight title match, because their title match did not end with an official winner. Their match ended by a disqualification. So, or no contest, as it would be called today. So they let Lex Luger join the team, and at the end of that, at the end of War Games, Hogan made Zodiac surrender
pulling him back like a half camel clutch, where he pulled him back on his face, but on his face, which meant he pulled him back on the neck. But his arms were not over his knees, so that's why I call it half camel clutch. So he gets 5 minutes in the ring and cage, with the task match there for 5 minutes. 2 minutes into it, the Giant came out and assaulted him and turned Hogan's head sideways. Looked like he hurt his neck. So when I recorded first episode of Raw vs. Nitro, I spoke about that part at the end of that episode. So after hearing this, please